$200 million bucks. Give us a sense. Does Bill normally do things like this?
He does tend to make these bets. I think when he believes something, he really believes it, so he does double down. But this is just an interesting one for the size of it. $200 million for a guy who's worth $2 billion is not insignificant.
No, absolutely not. Important to point out, though, that this money isn't going into the fund that people identify most closely with Bill, which
Correct.
is to say the Total Return Fund, the world's largest mutual fund, which hasn't been doing so well.
That's exactly right. So he's actually investing.
And we should point out, of course, he manages it.
Right. So he manages total return. They've had outflows. It's been a tough go. Their performance is improving, but they're kind of still struggling to regain control of the message. But these funds that he's investing in are managed by his deputy CIOs, which he appointed in January. So this is a guy, Dan Ivascyn is a very promising Morningstar, all these accolades from last year where he's really outperformed, and Bill Gross is buying in.
Michael, how does the trade work?
Well, it's an interesting trade because basically what he's doing is betting, he's arbitraging the net. Well, first of all, these are closed-end funds. So they have a net asset value like a mutual fund and a money market fund. And he's leveraging the difference between the price and what you can buy the fund at. And right now you can buy the fund at a discount. So he is betting that with interest rates low, prices on bonds are going to rise, and that's going to push up the price towards the net asset value, and he'll make money.
So you basically have this basket that's worth X, and you can buy it for X, 70% of X or something like that. And he's saying, why? This is great. I'm just going to scoop this right up. And there are funds that actually have dedicated strategies to this, like River North, and they just sit there and kind of close that gap or hope that it closes.
And at least one of these funds has been doing great so far this year.
That's exactly right. Yeah, PIMCO Dynamic Fund. Yeah,
funds, right?
exactly.
Yes.
Ivascyn's has returned 20% this year.
Could somebody argue there's a little bit of PR in this? Bill Gross is, they faced massive outflows. He's saying, I'm putting my own money there. Is this a quasi, PIMCO advertisement he's running?
It does kind of end up working that way. We did ask him about it, so he didn't come to us with this idea, but it was sort of, it works out nicely. They're like, actually, this fund's pretty great, huh? So.
Well, the problem with this trade, in terms of an advertisement, it is very risky. If interest rates go up, if Janet Yellen should say the wrong thing, then Bill Gross is in a whole lot of trouble. And I look back to when Ben Bernanke brought up the whole tapering idea, and we saw this massive reaction with bond yields. Now, his bet is that's not going to happen. She'll keep her mouth shut for a while.
And even if it does happen, he can afford to ride it out.
He can afford to ride it out where the average person can't, because if he lost his whole investment, that's only 10% of what he's got.
Then what does it say about him as a risk manager? Because PIMCO investors are your average investors. And if he's the guy sitting on top and I'm an average investor and I see him wheeling and dealing and behaving like a cowboy, I don't know if I feel so good about it anymore.
But that's kind of always been the sell. He's always been this a little bit of a cowboy. He's always been, this is my bet. I really believe it. And he just, across asset classes, across funds, they all kind of go for it.
The average investor isn't calling up Bill Gross and saying, can I have part of the total return fund? They're looking at what he's doing, and then they're going to their own advisor, and their own advisor hopefully telling them, you don't want to be in this because you don't have that kind of money to lose, but
we've got another investor.
And furthermore, if they agree with him, they can invest in the Total Return Fund, which is less of a risky proposition.
Exactly. There's less leverage. It's not the same strategy, but you're right that it is kind of risk. You have to know what kind of risk you're willing to take on, and not all of us are Bill Gross.
And one assumes he knows when the Fed is likely to raise rates. He's going to be looking at what everybody's view is, and he'll probably be getting out before that time.
One would hope. I think that he will tell you that he's taking kind of the long view on this, that what you do is you're lending out for a long time when you sit on this trade, and so he can weather the storm, as you say. If there are kind of blips in between when the Fed gets off message, that's fine with him.
You look at what the fund has done, and it's a very volatile trade, too. This has been up and down, and in March, the value really crashed. So he's got to be careful, but he can afford to lose it. The average person probably doesn't want to look at that kind of risk.